pro fights in UFC, there's a lot of genetics and luck involved in it too. And there's definitely design, right? Like I try not to make the same mistakes twice, and I'm actually, I pay attention to it, and I'm very hard on myself, so I don't make those mistakes twice. So, I think that, being born to the parents that I was born to it definitely helped me along the way here.
Jim, what's up, man? Good to see you. Technical difficulties, but such is the way of life, right?
Absolutely.
It's good to see you, man. You shared some really cool stuff with me, and I caught probably, 35% of it.
It happens, right? I live in the middle of the woods, so I never know if it's my connection to the internet or anything like that. So yeah, it's a pain living out here sometimes.
I see the Montana Knife Company hoodie. Where do you live in Montana, or where do you live?
I live in New Jersey, unfortunately. Yeah.
Oh, New Jersey.
Still stuck here. Yeah.
I mean, there are some rural parts. Most people don't think or know that there are some rural parts of New Jersey and even New York. Most people think of Lower Manhattan when they start thinking about that area, but there are some rural parts that will allow.
Yep. Yeah. The Appalachian Trail is like 2 miles that way.
Have you ever hiked it?
I'm a little bit.
Yeah. I've got a friend of mine. He actually over, I want to say 3 to 4 years, hiked the entire Appalachian Trail with his family.
Oh, wow.
So he would take one summer and he'd spend a month or two and he'd hike part of it. And then the next summer, another 2 months and another 2 months and another 2 months. So I was in Maine up until about a year ago. And unfortunately, that's the northernmost point of the Appalachian Trail. Unfortunately, I never took advantage of the opportunity to be out there and hike that.
That sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's some really cool spots.
No doubt. So the way we led off the conversation last time, before anybody had the opportunity to hear what we were talking about because of these technical difficulties, is as I was going through, we've known each other for some time now, but as I was going through what I wanted to talk with you about, the nickname A10 really stood out to me. And obviously the Warthog is a fan favorite among men, but I'm very curious as to why you chose that nickname for your fight nickname.
The name Jim Miller's, it's kind of vanilla, right? So it doesn't brand that well. So, I fought for years without a nickname, and I was finally like, let me try to let's figure something out, right? And there's like 19 UFC fighters that are the Pitbull and Assassin and all this stuff. And, when I was growing up, my uncle was a pilot in the Marine Corps, flew the Ospreys. And, he gave us, my brothers and I, a calendar with all the fighter jets in it. And I remember like the A10 was always my favorite. Right. And, as I grew older, the more I learned about it, I was like, man, this is like, it's a gun they taught how to fly, essentially, right? So it's like, it's made to fight. And that's kind of the way that I feel about myself. It's like, I'm made to be a fighter. My athletic attributes are specifically for fighting, right? Like I've got a horrible vertical, I've got a terrible arm. Like there are lots of things that like I get embarrassed doing when it comes to sports, but I was built to be a fighter. So, I always loved it. And I feel like it kind of works, it's a little bit slower, ugly looking plane. I had the opportunity to go see some, recently when I was out in Vegas, and a little off center, right? The gun's a little off center. I'm a little off center. So it kind of just works.
That makes sense. I like that you said it's a plane built around a weapon, because it really is. I've done a little bit of studying, and because it is an incredible machine, and it really is. We're going to have a gun, and then we got to figure out a way to get this thing up in the air. And that's really what they did. Is there some, I want to say, did I see an article not too long ago about a revamp of the A10? I don't know if you know anything about this, but I thought I saw a revamp of the A10.
I don't know. Everything that I've heard is that they're trying to like decommission it in the next, few years, which again, it seems like it's kind of, I'm getting older, right? This is the planes that I got to see were, just as old as I am, essentially. And they're trying to make it retire. So,
are you feeling decommissioned or what?
In some aspects of it, yeah. I got called the grandpa of the UFC by a local paper wrote that. And I'm like, is this somebody that like I beat up on the wrestling mats and then became a journalist that's writing this? It was a little bit of a dig.
Well, look, if you end up fighting again, and we can talk a little bit about that, but I think you got to change that nickname to Jim Grandpa Miller, and go kick his ass.
Absolutely. Yeah.
How many more professional fights do you have left in you?
A few. For me, it's not necessarily about the fights. This fight, I took a little bit of damage, right? I probably got the worst cut that I've ever gotten. I got 23 stitches, but then I broke my hand and my toe in the fight. And, in the grand scheme of things, pretty mild injuries compared to what can happen. But probably some of the worst, injuries that I've had in a fight. But like for me, it's all about the training camp, right? Like if I can get through training camps, get into shape, be prepared, and then perform, I'm gonna continue to do it at least for a few more. And that's really what it comes down to. This camp was not bad. Like it's definitely harder for me to fight, 2 times in 3 months nowadays, but camp went well. Fight wasn't my fight. I didn't perform. But like I feel like it was a winnable fight. I had some opportunities. Even hurt and bleeding. I rocked them a couple times, and we'll get a few more in there. And I kind of put it out there like I don't want to fight any more than 50 times in the UFC, which is a ridiculous thing to say. But that's another 6 fights. 2 years if I'm fighting the way that at the pace that I want to fight. And I think I've got that.
But I have your record your professional record anyways at 37, 18 and 1. So that puts you over 50 fights. Am I off on that?
Well, that's total fights. So I had 12 fights prior to the UFC. I have 44 fights inside the UFC.
Got it. So your goal, if I understand you correctly, is to hit 50 fights in the UFC. Yeah,
that's it's going to be a lofty one. It'll be a little bit tough, but I like putting those types of goals that like they're not easy, right? Like I don't want it to be easy. Otherwise, I'm not going to make the goal. So we'll see if we can get it done, and if everything goes the way it's been going the last couple of years, I think I'll be able to do it.
I've got so many questions for you. First, your last fight, was it April? Was it 13th? April 13th, right?
Yep.
What UFC was that? 300?
That was 300, yes.
300. You're the first person to fight in 100, 200, and 300. The only person.
Yeah. Only person, yeah.
Yeah. And I'm very curious about that. 23 stitches, you said. 2 weeks later, no homo here, but you look unbelievable.
Thank you. Yeah, I've always been a pretty quick healer, right? So, like even to the point where like my hand is broken, but they didn't cast it. Like I went to the hand specialist the other day, and he's like, "Yeah, no, it's healing well. Don't do anything stupid." So he gave me a wrap and stuff to put on it, but like, he's like, "Yeah, the way I broke it, it kind of crushed in, and it's not going anywhere unless I do something really bad, like hit somebody with it." So, it should be fine. So.
Is the secret genetics and physiology, or is there some secret? Because I see guys like Chandler and other people, I'm like, how the hell does this guy recover in a matter of 3, 4, 5 days where I'd be banged up for months?
I honestly, I do think that it's we all must share some type of genetics when it comes to that, right? Because to be able to go through training camps over and over again and take the beating that you put on yourself, you have to be able to recover quickly. And I think that if you didn't have that ability, you would probably not get too far into your career, fighting at the highest levels. So, I think that there are a lot of guys that seem to have the same, Wolverine style healing factor. It's the whole career thing, right? And like 44 fights in UFC, there's a lot of genetics and luck involved in it too. And there's definitely design, right? Like I try not to make the same mistakes twice, and I'm actually, I pay attention to it, and I'm very hard on myself, so I don't make those mistakes twice. So, I think that, being born to the parents that I was born to it definitely helped me along the way here.
So you said a word, you said luck, and when anybody says that, I kind of cringe internally, but you're talking about who you were born to, immutable characteristics, people you were born to, things you had no control over. You're not talking about like, I'm just a lucky dude. You're just saying, hey, I was born in America. I've got good parents. I've got some good genes that are built for fighting. Or is there something more to it? Because I don't generally like that word luck, because people ascribe hard work to luck, and it discounts what a guy like you has to go through in order to play at the level you play at.
The thing is, I've lived this life for, what is it, almost 20 years now, right? It'll be 19 years in like a few weeks, right? That I started training to compete in MMA. And I have seen a lot of very talented, very athletic fighters just have one bad day, and it cost them, right? I know that there is I'm not a big fan of the word luck, right? And because like I said, there is design. There's design to the way that I've created my life, and I've created my team. But to not have one of those devastating injuries at practice, like when I wasn't doing all the right things, there probably is just a little bit of luck. Cause like I said, I've seen one group sparring fall into another group and somebody blow their knee out because of it. And it's like, it's controllable to a degree, right? Like coaches should be controlling things. Fighters in the match should have control over where they are in relation to everybody else, because in a fight you need to be controlling in relation to the cage and everything as well. But it's also just bad luck sometimes, where somebody just something bad happens, fortunately, knock on wood, that none of those types of injuries have happened to me.
I think also, and look, I'm trying to do it justice, and like the luck thing, I'm a little hesitant about saying it, but I also know it's a law of large numbers. I have the opportunity of being the quote unquote team photographer for my oldest son's lacrosse team. And there's some kids who are naturally talented and they just get it. Their athletic IQ is developed relative to others. There's other kids who I think are meant to pursue the arts, and other kids who are meant to pursue STEM, for example. So it's difficult, because when we look at somebody performing at the highest levels like you have, we think, oh, this guy's done everything right. But also, if we're looking at it honestly, it is the law of large numbers. And you, for whatever reason, through physiology, through hard work, determination, mindset, et cetera, and maybe a little luck like you're talking about, have climbed through the ranks that other people do. But you said something interesting. You said design. Do you feel like that's solely your design? Or when I hear you say that, I also feel like maybe I'm off, but I'm hearing a little bit of like design as in the creator's design, but maybe I'm way off. What do you think about that?
I think it's more so just by like me shaping my my training atmosphere, right? Like I started my own gym about 10 years ago, and it was a difficult decision to make. We were dealing with some of the big gym drama and issues that often are dealt with. And, I lost training partners. I lost coaches in doing that. But I also really whittled things down to like, hey, I don't have to worry about some new guy that a lot of times, doesn't speak English or doesn't speak it very well and doesn't really get the culture of the gym. And it comes in and it's like, sees a target on your back, during a training day. So like I kind of created an environment where, it was smaller, it was tighter, definitely lost out on bodies and skill sets and stuff like that. But, just making it not so like ego driven is what kind of ends up happening sometimes in these bigger gyms. You get a bunch of, fighters in there and everybody's trying to win that day as opposed to get everybody better.
It is interesting because I've trained not nearly to the degree that you have. And I know that when things go well, it's because I go in there and experiment and learn and try new things. When things don't go well, it's because I'm trying to submit somebody. And I fall into my default patterns. I fall into things that I'm comfortable with and know. And I may not even train against upper belts because I'm more worried about winning than I am about learning and growing.
There's a fine line that we gotta walk, like when we're training. And it's like that playful aspect, right? Like that's where we're going to make gains. That's where you're going to usually be like a lot, I don't know if safer is the right word, but like you're just kind of goofing off sometimes on the mat and just working with new things, right? And Rogan always says like beat up blue belts, right? That's how he thinks everybody should get better at jiu-jitsu. And my whole thing was that I was always competing with my brother, who's 5 inches taller than me, 30 pounds heavier than me. And he was always the guy that I was trying to beat, and like we would go back and forth, through the years of like, I'd have a good couple weeks and he'd have a good couple weeks. And like, and like over the years, I kind of figured out like, okay, like there are times where I have to, where, I have to focus on like, all right, what are my strengths? I'm going to roll or I'm going to spar and I'm going to go to my strengths and beat people. And then there are times where it's like, hey, like, let's just play. And like, if you get submitted or you get caught in something, you get taken down, this and that, like, whatever, like, we're just trying to learn new things, learn new movements and pathways. And, like it's, having that playful mindset it's important. It's definitely important sometimes. There's obviously the times to get serious and get into it and to, like today we win, but I have to learn how to balance that.
Jim, what's up, man? It's good to have you back. We tried to do part one and the guys probably don't know this, but we had some major internet issues on Friday. So we figured we'd take Sunday and do part two of this discussion. The first one was only like 20 or 30 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah, I live in the middle of the woods, so like it's usually my fault, right? When Wi-Fi gets spotty and all that stuff. So I'll take full blame for that falling through the other day.
All good. I guess that's just part of the deal, and I think it's okay that people hear it because we have to have some level of flexibility, some level of resilience. I know there's a lot of guys out there when things don't go right or things don't always work according to plan. It's like their whole universe crumbles, and obviously that's not going to be conducive to any measure of success in life. I'm sure you're familiar with that, especially in your line of work when somebody else also has a say in the matter about how you perform on any given night in a fight.
Yeah, absolutely. I try to that I can actually control, and over the years, I've learned that two things that I can fully control, and that's my effort and my attitude. Everything else, there's always something that an opponent has a choice or whatever. There's lots of variables in everything. So, I just try to attitude and keep my head screwed on right and control the effort that I put into every task.
What is it like when you show up? I mean, obviously with your career and the amount of times you've stepped in and had these fights, how do you deal with the adversity if the night doesn't go according to plan. Because, you know, when most people fail, it's a few people know about it. When you don't perform the way that you want to, or it doesn't quite go your way, even if you do perform the way you want to, it's very public. Literally hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people are going to watch, you know, 2 seconds of something that maybe you didn't quite read right, or it didn't quite go the way you wanted it to. And all of a sudden, you know, that becomes an indictment on who you are because of a 2-second snippet millions of people will see.
You know, like you said, yeah, there's you know, I'm stepping into a cage against somebody that has an opinion that's prepared for weeks for me. Yeah, and sometimes things just don't like fire. They just don't come together in a fight. And I've never been the type to look back. You know, like I'm always focused on the next steps and what I can do to prevent those types of things from happening. You know, the next time out, right? And something that I've learned, you know, over the years too, is that like one of the things that means the most to me is the respect for my peers, right? And like I look at the other fighters that have committed their lives to this sport, and like the legends of the sport that I consider the Fedors and Henzo and Chuck Liddell and Matt Hughes and these guys, like they've never given me crap on the internet, right? They've never like trolled me, you know, after a fight, right? These are the guys that created this sport for me and created a you know, my fascination with it. And like if I go out and they're not speaking negatively on me, then like what does it matter to me if somebody that's never actually put gloves on their hands is gonna say something? So yeah, I try to just like focus on like carrying myself to my set of standards that I've created, which are high. You know, like I definitely have high and want to portray and who I want to be. And yeah, like I kind of know that I'm not going to fully live up to those standards, but yeah, like if I do that, then those guys that I consider legends of the sport are going to appreciate what I do in there. And yeah, like you said, there could be millions of people that see me on a bad day, but very, very few of those people have done what I do. So it's you know, everybody's entitled to their opinion. It's just that certain opinions have a little more weight than others, you know? So yeah, I try to just look at it that way and keep doing what I'm doing, because I'm here for a reason.
Yeah, no, that's a great way to look at it. And you know, there's it seems like there's usually two schools of thought. One says everybody's opinion matters equally, which is not the case, and the other says nobody's opinion matters, and I don't think that's the case. There are people in my life whose opinion I care about. Mm-hmm. So I think it's healthy when you're talking about guys that you look up to specifically in your career. Those opinions matter. Like that is important to you, because that's going to help you see what you can do and what you're capable of. And even if those people do share something that's not trolling you, but just some healthy criticism or critique, mm-hmm. if you take it correctly, it could actually make you better if you actually care about what these individuals say.
Absolutely. Yeah. You know, so, yeah. And I mean, that's the thing, right? Like if one of those guys comes up to me and says like, hey, you know, Jim, you should you know, reassess. You should be a little embarrassed the way you carried yourself or something like that. Then I'm gonna take it to heart. Where yeah, it's you know, we live in this world where there's instant access to us because of our phones and social media and all that stuff. And as a fighter, we're very accessible. In terms of like professional athletes, we're super accessible compared to some of, you know, our peers in other sports. So yeah, like if some with an account that they obviously just use for trolling people, you know, comes on and says something silly, it's like, all right, well, you know, sometimes I'll just goof off with them and you know, push their buttons back a little bit, but yeah, you can't take it to heart.
Yeah. You said you talked about you holding yourself to this very high standard, and clearly that's the case. You know, when somebody sees you perform, and to the level which you have performed for a long time now, requires you to be that way. Do you find yourself not giving yourself grace, or not allowing yourself to, you know, make mistakes, or is there a balance there for you? What does that look like for you? Because I know for me it's hard when I do screw up. I'm really self-critical, and I get down on myself and beat myself up in a way. Do you do the same thing, or have you found grace in some of those moments of, you know, not showing up the way you'd like to?
You know, more so the standards that I set upon myself. Like I know that like I could go out and I could do everything right and I could still lose a fight. You know, it's a fine line that we're walking. So it's not necessarily like the fight. It's how I carry myself. You know, that's the pressure that I put on myself. That's the, you know, when I'm really like kind of, you know, heavy on myself is like, hey, did you do the right things? Like, are you being a good example to your kids and to the other kids watching? Are you a good man? Right. You know, so like I could still go out and, you know, and lose a fight and still be a good man. And yeah, like that's where I'm really hard on myself is how I've carried myself through adversity. You know, like I've been asked quite a few times, like, is there a fight that you'd like to have back? And, you know, like the more that I think about it, it's like, yeah, my fight with Lyme disease, you know, like I'd rather that didn't happen. All the other fights, hey man, it's a flip of the coin when it comes down to it. You know, you go out into a fight, it's 15 minutes. You try to create momentum. Sometimes it doesn't happen. Sometimes somebody has your number, or sometimes you just don't perform. But the fight with, you know, with Lyme, like, yeah, like that was kind of one of those things where it sets my career apart from a lot of my peers in having to deal with that. And yeah, like I wish that didn't happen, but you know, the example that I lead carrying myself through that BS of getting bit by a tick, not knowing about it, having Lyme disease, undiagnosed for essentially 3 years, and then going through the process of healing it, which was just as brutal on me. You know, like my goal was to not be a martyr, and to carry myself through that hard time with grace and you know, humility and not like playing the victim role. You know, and I think I've done that pretty well. You know, like I try to talk about it a little bit, but I try not to like make it the biggest thing. But it's a like that's the hardest part, is like in failure and in the hard times is still doing the right thing, you know, because that's when people do have that maybe the urge to kind of break their standards a little bit and to not live up to those standards that they put on themselves. And you know, it's not easy, and I've definitely faltered, that's for sure. But you know, like there's always to like, you know, I got 4 kids looking up to me, and you know, they're my biggest fans, and I want them to look at me and be like, hey, you know, like he might not have won every fight, but like he carried himself through those hard times, you know, and did the right thing.
Yeah, that's a good litmus test. So with your kids, what do they think about what you do? You know, do they watch the fights? Like, I don't know how old they are, but do they watch, and are they scared? Is it something they enjoy and they see value in, or is it something they don't like at all? What's that like?
You know, this last one was tough, right? This last one was tough because
Yeah.
I was bleeding everywhere for half the fight. You know, my older son, he's 12. He texted me after. He's like, how you feeling? And I was like, I'm good, buddy. You know, and he's like, that was a pretty brutal one. And I was like, yeah, man, like that's the way it goes. So my kids are 13, 12, 10, and my youngest will be 9 in a few days. So like they're getting to that age where they understand what I do, They've been around it their whole lives. My oldest was born in 2010, so like I had already been in UFC for a year and a half when she was born, almost 2 years. So they've seen it. They've been to events, and they've seen me train plenty of times. I still do feel like it kind of it goes over their head a little bit sometimes. That's because it's like, what I do in the Octogon, I take it very seriously. There's a part of me that wishes I could have a little more fun with it sometimes, but like it's not one of those things that I can like. I see some of my peers that like do these fancy walkouts and stuff like that, and it's like, they look like they're having fun, and like we should have fun doing this stuff, right? Technically, it's still entertainment, right? It's a competition, but it's entertainment.
So they need to come to all the events. Then it sounds like. You're my good luck charms here. Don't be missing my fights. I need you here. I think too, where they're still fairly young, as they're getting older. It sounds like you guys are having open discussion about it too, and I think that's probably the key is because of what you do. It's so visible, physically they can see they see what's happening in a fight. They can see what you're wearing on your face, the scars and the bruises from the fight itself. I think your ability to talk with them and communicate effectively with them and help them understand is something that I'm not necessarily great at, but it is something I'm trying to work on, is making sure that I'm addressing their fears or doubts or concerns. So there's no assumptions in it, because I don't want my kids to assume. Usually when they do assume, people make assumptions. It usually goes the wrong way. They're not assuming the right things, and I don't want them to have to fill in the blanks. I want to help them understand and clearly communicate what's happening and going on.
Yeah. It's a fine line, I guess, as a parent, especially these days too, right? Like, my kids see me fight people, right? So like they understand that, they're exposed to physical violence like all the time. Like every time they watch me train, every time they watch me fight, they see it. Boys are wrestling. My oldest, she's done some Muay Thai and stuff like that, and she actually wrestled when she was younger. And they're like kind of getting to that age where I could start to like really kind of bring them into it, and so it's like kind of like, hey, like here's the deal, like I can show you moves, I can show you how to fight, but we need to understand when is the right time to use the stuff that I'm showing you, and that's a balance that I have to meet, like, listen, like you guys are allowed to finish a fight, but you're not allowed to start a fight, so there have been a couple instances, like of course it's my oldest, she likes to she's very protective, so she's been she's been in a couple scuffles, but they seem to be getting that where it's like, hey, like there is a line, like what I do is a profession, and it's a competition and a form of entertainment, but it's also like it's a tool that you could use in life. And I my job as a father is to protect and to educate and provide for my kids, right? Like that's so they don't see violence outside of me training or fighting. Like it just doesn't exist because I use my brain and our feet, and we avoid any situation where that would be the case. So I'm trying to raise them to be capable and be able to fight, but also use their minds and their running shoes to get away if they need to.
Yeah, I mean, that's the best defense, right? Is just not to get into these types of situations. Obviously, You're voluntarily stepping into one, but outside of the ring or the octagon, the goal is not to get into these sorts of situations.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
You said your daughter's protective when she's in that mode. Is it protective of her siblings? Is it like what is she protective of? What is it that she's her mindset is?
My oldest, she's my dad is he was, at least before he like squished himself through carrying heavy stuff. He was like 6'4", 240, big dude. Even bigger like personality type. My daughter got my dad's genes. Like she's almost as tall as I am at 13. It she'll probably start slowing down at this point, but like she could be taller than I am, and so she's protective of her friends because she's like a bigger kid, like
Yeah.
she's probably like 5'5" at this point at 13 years old, which is way taller than I was. So yeah, she's protective of her friends and her siblings, but I think a majority of the times it's happened, it's been with her friends.
Yeah. Well, that's good. It's a good characteristic to have. It's just something, and it's funny because all kids are different, right? And so what one child has as a virtuous characteristic, I would say, is being protective. But also it becomes something that it could be used, like you said earlier, in the wrong context, and it becomes a hindrance as opposed to something that could positively impact your life and people around you as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I want to go back to, because you were talking about Lyme disease. So one thing, if you don't mind sharing, so you were bit by a tick but no symptoms or anything like that for 3 years. And by then, because if I understand correctly, ticks are disgusting little creatures. And so they're all sorts of nasty illnesses. If you catch it earlier, I think there's a very heavy dose or rounds of antibiotics that take care of the issue. But when it sets in like that, I imagine treating it is a completely different course of action.
Yeah. So, Lyme is one of those illnesses that's like there's new stuff coming out every day, right? There's not enough funding for it, and it's a like the government was using ticks as a vector. So, well, like they were researching use, right? So It's like it almost has things about it that you're like, if you were going to make something, like it's maybe it would be this, but because the bacteria can cross the blood-brain barrier, and so what happened to me is I believe that I was bit in like late May, early June of 2013. I had an initial set of symptoms. I don't really get headaches, and I had like migraines. I ended up getting like 7 migraines in 10 days or something like that. And,
Whoa.
Yeah, I had a bunch of like I was really nauseous too, like to the point where bringing the garbage out to the end of the driveway, I'd be like dry heaving the whole way for like 2 weeks, 3 weeks. It was really weird. So because of like those headaches, I went to the doctor, went to a neurologist, ENT. They did a whole bunch of tests on me. They actually tested me for Lyme disease, and about 50% of people don't even test positive for it.
Interesting.
So had we gone on some doxycycline right away, a 3-week, 4-week course, it might have knocked it out. But since I didn't test positive, where it was like kind of like, hey, we'll see if symptoms come back, and we'll address at that point. And time went on, and my symptoms that I ended up getting over the course of the years before I was diagnosed with it, I thought was all stuff that like, hey, I'm a professional fighter. Like this is what I'm supposed to deal with. I had massive, joint pain, like to the middle pounds, super warm, and I'd go to stand up and I'd have to like brace on my knee and, like be an old man. I was like early 30s, right? So at that point it shouldn't have been like that. But, I was having a lot of brain fog, some cognitive issues, right? Like I would kind of get like lost in rooms sometimes. If I had stuff to do, it's hard to describe what it was like. But there's a plaque, a protein that the bacteria creates. That's it's nearly identical to like Alzheimer's.
Interesting.
So like there are parts of like 2015, 16 that like I don't really have really great memories of. I can remember training camps and all sorts of stuff way back, but like there's a period where there's kind of like just a blanket over it that I can't access those memories. And just some other stuff. I was getting a lot of like just twitching and like nerve pain. And it wasn't until 2016 that I was talking to my doctor. I was doing a pre-fight physical for UFC 196 and was talking about some of the stuff that I was dealing with. And he's like, I think you might have Lyme disease. We're going to run some tests. And it ended up being like I was out in Las Vegas for my fight and basically just about to start my weight cut. And he calls me up and he's like, yeah, I'm pretty sure you got Lyme disease. So when you get back, we'll start a course of antibiotics. And instead of that, 3-week dose of antibiotics, I ended up being on doxycycline. I did a 6-month stint on it.
Whoa.
Went off of it for a little bit. Yeah. And it just destroys your gut biome and like it causes its own problems.
Sure. Yeah.
I went off it for a little bit because I felt way better than I had, and it came back. The Lyme came back and really kicked my butt beginning of 2017, and then I went on it again for another essentially like 2 years. So it was a long road out, like a really long road out, and we're talking about a few years of my physical peak, right, as a man, like my early 30s, right? Like I'm mature mentally and emotionally and physically now, and I'm not starting to break down yet because I'm not a 40-year-old like I am now in a young man's game. And it was taken away from me, by a tick. And it's a tough thing, but it's like, hey, you know what? I'd rather go through the tough stuff. I'd rather deal with it. And, my kids are healthy and strong and keep giving me stuff and like keep them healthy and not having to deal with anything, so, these shoulders are broad enough to handle that. So, that's kind of the way that I look at it. I'd rather I dealt with it than one of my kids.
Yeah. That's a really encouraging way to look at it. I didn't actually know that once it set in. So is Lyme disease curable?
There's still, that's still kind of up in the air, right? Like, so,
okay.
So if you catch it early, they say it is, right? So like if you have those initial symptoms and you some antibiotics, they say that you will overcome it. Once it gets a hold, it's really difficult to get rid of. And I kind of understand that, like, at a point, it could come back, and it might be a new tick bite, right? It might be a new infection, or it might be some remnants of the old infection. Who knows? I've had the opportunity to meet a lot of people that have dealt with some really bad cases of it over the years, and absolutely amazing, super tough people, and it's an unfortunate thing that it's still such a like kind of taboo illness to talk about, right? Like it's everybody knows about it these days, but it's like, yeah, what research is being done, what treatment, what new treatment is coming out, and like there's really, if you really pay attention, there's stuff here and there, right? But like I think most people don't have a huge grasp on it because it's like it's not at the forefront, and it does have a massive negative effect on people's lives, especially, like I said, when it gets when it goes untreated for a few years, it can be really devastating.
Yeah, I mean, the first time I was really introduced to it, I had a woman who was a client of mine. I was in financial services, and she had told me that she was dealing with that, but there wasn't any visible signs that she was dealing with Lyme disease. But then I remember she went to sign some paperwork, and she could hardly even write her name. I mean, her hand was like trembling, and it was very difficult for her to write. And she told me about it. I'm like, oh my goodness, I had no idea up to that point. I imagine that just comes with you being in the woods of New Jersey. I wasn't really introduced to ticks until I moved to Maine. I mean, there are some, I think, in southern Utah, but not like Maine. It's crazy.
Yeah. The thing, right, is that it's like I've found more ticks on me, working in my own garden than I have, in the woods. And
really,
over the years, I'm an outdoorsman. I hunt, I fish, I do all this stuff. Anytime I can be out in the woods, I'm in the woods. And the amount of like hunters and anglers that I have met at some of these, fundraising events and stuff like that is pretty small. Like a majority of people is just normal people, right? Like, and that's the crazy thing too, is it's a deer tick. We think deer. But the thing that spreads those ticks the most is the mouse, right? The white-footed mouse. So
really,
yeah. So like I preach it all the time. I live in an old house. I've got a dirt floor basement, so I deal with mice, right? Like we got some cats, and they're pretty good now. So, but with no quarter, right? Especially like this time of year, spring, things warming up. Right, they like it in the fall and the spring. Right, they come into the house, just show them no quarter, those little bastards. Right, so it's kind of funny that I've met a few like hunters over the years, but a majority of people, it's just they don't even really know. Maybe they went to a park or this or that. But it's it doesn't, those little things, man, they can be anywhere, and it doesn't really matter.
I almost wonder if part of the reason is because when you're out in the woods, to check for ticks, right? If you've spent any amount of time out there, you're supposed to be checking. And so you're actually vigilant about it. Yeah. But if you're at the park or working in your garden, or it's just not as common for someone to have to check for that. So they're probably not. And I wonder if it has more to do with that than anything else.
Yeah, probably. Right. Like when I go hunting, I'm layering and this and that. Right. So I got base layers on, which is going to keep them off most of the time. And like turkey season, I'm taking steps to, to keep them away from me, right? Bug spray and this and that, and
closing
all those
up your boots,
I know that
pants, that sort of thing.
Yeah. So it's like, I think that you're out in the yard for a walk or something like that. You're not really expecting it, but they can be absolutely anywhere.
Yeah. Have you always been an outdoorsman? I mean, obviously you're big into hunting, and I've followed your account and you pretty closely. And I think, you've got a Montana Knife Company hat on. I think you had the hoodie on the other day. Like, obviously they're big fans of what we're doing. I'm big fans of what they're doing. So I love to see people supporting them. But did you grow up in the outdoors, or what did that look like?
When I was a kid, right? Like it was, I didn't start hunting until I was like, I think 15 or 16. My dad didn't want to like push us into it. Like he grew up running bird dogs and beagles, and hunting in New Jersey was a lot different when he was a kid. And even like when I was a kid, it was different than it is today. But he worked 6 days a week, so he didn't have the time to get us our hunter's education and all this stuff. So he let my brothers and I take that on ourselves. And when my oldest brother got his driver's license, we went and we got our hunter's education and start down that road. But like as kids, we grew up hearing all the stories of him and our grandfather and all the things that they would do. And we lived in the woods when I was a kid. It was the best. Like it was awesome. I mean, we would be 2 miles from the house some days, like during the summer, and like my oldest brother being 4 years older than me, it's like a 10-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 6-year-old, just like 2 miles through the woods in the it's like just during the 80s. It was different. Right. It was a different time.
Right.
So like, yeah, we would always be just going on adventures and doing stuff. Right. So like once I got my hunting license, yeah, it was always something I wanted to do. And like, yeah, started down that road, and I've learned a lot, particularly in the last like couple of years, right? Like I crap about social media. I don't think it's the best thing, but like I've learned a lot off of it, particularly in the things that I enjoy doing, like hunting and fishing, right? And I've had the opportunity to meet a lot of people through social media that are way better, hunters and fishermen than I am. So it's always been a part of my life, essentially. Just either dreaming about it, or once I got my license, then yeah, I was always trying to get in the woods. And it took me a couple of years to get a deer and this and that, but it's yeah, now I feel like hunting is more of it's just a lifestyle to me, because like we do eat it as much as we can. Whether it's the venison or elk. I've been able to make it part of our lives, and now it's like really introducing the kids and trying to get them out there. They've all helped, process animals and stuff like that. They've all been pheasant hunting. So now it's like trying to get them, into the outdoors as well, which is fun. It's like there's a trade-off. There's definitely a trade-off with it, but it's fun to get them out and experiencing it.
Yeah, no, I feel the same way. I mean, I didn't start hunting until about 8 years ago, eight years, maybe okay. Closer to 9, somewhere in there now. But it's more than hunting. It, like you said, it's a lifestyle. It's ingrained in me, as it sounds like it is with you. And man, I'm always encouraging guys who listen to go on a hunt. Go on a high success ratio pig hunt. Spend time in the woods. If you like it, cool. Keep doing it. If you don't, cool. But I think everybody needs to take advantage of the opportunity to go harvest their own food, and it's not just about that, but that is a big component. And there's a sense of pride and satisfaction and actually being connected with nature that I think every man ought to experience to some degree.
Yeah, I think everyone should experience it. It is important to have a little bit more like knowledge of where your meat comes from, right? Mm-hmm. Like going through that process and sharing it with people is probably my favorite thing, right? Like making some back straps for people that have never had venison before, and just like caveman in it, right? Just plopping them off the grill and slicing things on a cutting board, and everybody's diving in with their fingers. It's like, it's the best. It's the best to see the look on people's faces, like, oh my God, this is great. It tastes so good. And it's like, yeah, the first couple of deer I shot didn't taste that great because like my field care wasn't as good and this and that. Like I've learned a lot through the process, of years, right? Like over 20 years of doing it. But now it's like, hey, if you do things the right way and learn a few different things, like, yeah, it's like, it's so good. And it's, there's an appreciation, I think, that people kind of develop for their food, and like we kind of trade our health for convenience these days, and it's it sucks, like I every time I get, I barely ever eat fast food, but when I do, it's like I kind of hate myself for it a little bit, and it's like man, it tastes good, right? But it's like this sucks, because I would rather it be like, hey, I'm taking a piece of a deer or elk or whatever, and eating that way. I'd rather eat that way all the time, but like I like to try to do things the harder way and put a little more effort into them, and sharing the game that I harvest with people is there's no harder way. So I enjoy it.
Yeah. Well, it seems like you do like to take the harder path, and there's obviously a lot of value in that. Not to make it harder for making it harder, but harder because from what I hear, it's fulfilling, and there's value in learning and growing and becoming tougher physically, mentally, emotionally. What's next for you? I think a couple of days ago you told me you have a goal of 50 professional fights. Is that right? 50 fights?
That's 50 UFC fights.
Yeah. Okay. Right.
Yeah.
Sure.
So, yeah. That's the hard stop. So, yeah.
Is that your hard stop or your wife's hard stop, or what is that like?
That's my hard stop. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Fair enough.
She could see me stop at any time. She'd be happy. But I'm still trying to figure that out. I've been able to be a professional fighter, and I think there's a difference between fighting professionally and being a professional fighter, right? Like because I had the support of my wife, I was able to, in the beginning, just dive in and try to make this a career, and things worked out. So I've been a professional fighter for a while now, and been able to pay our bills through fighting, and it's been awesome, and it's also been like, man, I've been spoiled with having control over my schedule and all this stuff, and like being able to do the things that I want to do, and I'm preparing myself for a day where I don't have the ability to do all the things that I want to do, because something will take my time, my whatever it is to provide for the family will take more of my time. I don't know. I'm going to do some analyst work for the UFC at I think it's what is it, UFC 302, which is a newer card. I think it's June 2nd or something like that.
Okay. Yeah.
I've done some commentating in the past, and I do enjoy it. I want a couple different things, like that's the problem, is like I want part of my life to revolve around the outdoors, so it's easier to bring my kids. But I also understand that like that's not an easy lifestyle. That's I look at like the outdoor world and the people that I'm close to who have made it their lives. I look at it as like the whole sponsorship game in MMA, and I never really enjoyed that type of stuff either. So, I'm just trying to figure it out. But I think that obviously, like media is going to be a part of the next step. So, trying to work on my talking skills and not words so often. But I'm going to be probably in front of a camera in one way, shape, or form. So I'm just kind of preparing myself for that.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate your time. I've been wanting to do this for some time now, so I'm glad that we finally were able to make it work. And even if we did have to span it over 2 different sessions because of our internet issues, please let the guys know where to connect with you, follow a little bit more about your career. And then also as things, eventually do navigate into wherever else you feel like going. We'd love to follow along and see what you're up to.
Yeah, I'm really only primarily on Instagram these days. So it's Jim Miller _155. It's I'm battling this social media thing. I'm trying to be present in my life and my family, and do the things and take my own advice, right? And like work on myself, and not so much for the entertainment of other people, right? I think that people kind of get caught up in the social media aspects of daily life these days. But yeah, I'm trying. I'm working on myself to be posting, sharing more, and but yeah, that's pretty much only where I'm at the moment. Got some stuff in the works that I'll be posting up shortly. Some t-shirts and all that fun stuff, and getting that going. So yeah, that's really it. That's awesome. Really it. I gotta get the YouTube up too. Like I gotta get on there.
There's always something. Well, Jim, look, I appreciate you, man. You and I will stay in touch. Please let me know if there's ways I can support you and what you have going on, because I'm all about that. Want to help people, especially if they do podcasts with me and they believe in what we're doing. I want to support that way. We'll sync everything up, man. Again, appreciate you. Thanks for joining me today.
No problem. Thanks for having me.